Good day, everyone. We are Group 5 presenting to you Ulysses by James Joyce. But before we start, I would like to thank every one of you for taking your time, listening, and taking notes. So before we move on, let us head and introduce the members of our group. I'm Giancarlo Pifabilio, this is Mickey A. Santos, Irish Jade A. Dormitorio, and Zoe D. Laudato. So, what is our overview for today? Author's background. Who is James Joyce? And what is his correlation to Ulysses? This is where we found out the background of the author and why did he make Ulysses. Next is the literary piece. We talk about the Odyssey versus Ulysses, which is we found out the difference between the two. Introduction to Ulysses, where we found most of the information we need about the piece itself, and the summary of chapters, where we summarize the whole text by its chapters.
So, moving on to the author's background, James Joyce, or also known as James Augustine Aloysius Joyce, was an Irish immigrant turned novelist, poet, and a literary critic. He was born on February 2, 1882 in Rathcar, Dublin, Ireland. He was born to John Stanislaus Joyce and Mary Jane Murray. But sadly, James Joyce died on January 13, 1941 due to complications after surgery. For additional information, he underwent numerous eye surgeries, but he is also known to have undergone a final surgery for perforated ulcer, which led to his death.
So what is the difference between Odyssey and Ulysses? The Odyssey is an ancient poem written by Homer in the 8th century BC, where it narrates the story of Odysseus on his trek home from the Trojan lands as after the war. It follows him fighting gods, monsters, such things like such things like that to find his way home back to Ithaca to his wife Penelope and son Telemachus. While Ulysses, meanwhile, is a novel made by James Joyce, published in February 2, 1922. It follows Leopold Bloom as he finds his way around Dublin. Story of Ulysses is loosely inspired by Homer's Odyssey as it uses the frameworks and such things to make the piece itself. Being Ulysses is a Latin word for Odysseus, which is the stand-in for Leopold Bloom in the story of Ulysses. So, quick introduction to Ulysses. Again, Ulysses is derived from the Latin word for Odysseus from Homer's The Odyssey. Uh, it was published in February 1922 after World War I ended. The novel explores the morality of humanity and what feels like to be old and facing everyday life trials. James Joyce used Homer's literary piece to help elevate Leopold Bloom's everyday life in Dublin. So, what it's trying to imply is Leopold Bloom is a stand-in for our Odysseus, and James Joyce used the Odyssey as the framework for his work to capsulate the adventure of Leopold Bloom as he faces the day itself.
Titled Telemachus. It took place on the Martello Tower in Sandy Cove near Dublin, where Stephen Dedalus lives with Buck Mulligan and an English visitor named Haynes. The story begins with Buck Mulligan starting a mock religious ceremony while teasing Stephen about his serious nature and refusing to pray for his dying mother. After that, Stephen feels hurt and isolated by Mulligan's mockery and Haynes' arrogant curiosity about Irish culture. As they have breakfast, it becomes clear to Stephen that Mulligan is just taking advantage of him, like borrowing money and treating him with little respect. At the end of the chapter, he decides not to return to the tower, symbolizing his wish to separate himself from their world and begin his own path, just as Telemachus from the Odyssey seeks his own journey. So every chapter there is a weird title, and that title symbolizes something. So for the first chapter, Telemachus, it symbolizes far from battle or fighting from afar. Uh, it is compared, Stephen Dedalus was compared to Telemachus because he chose not to return to the tower because he wants to separate himself from their world and begin his own path, just like Telemachus. Telemachus is the son of Odysseus and Penelope in Homer's epic, The Odyssey. In chapter 2 of Ulysses, it is titled Nestor, where Stephen Dedalus teaches history to his students at a boys' school in Dublin. As he goes through the lesson, his thoughts drift to his own struggles with poverty and purpose. After class, he gently helps a slow student named Cyril Sargent, feeling sympathy and seeing something himself in the boy. After that, Stephen then visits the headmaster, Mr. Dizzy, to collect his wages. Mr. Dizzy talks proudly about money, discipline, and conservative views, which seems to annoy Stephen. Before Stephen leaves, Mr. Dizzy asks Stephen to deliver a letter to a newspaper about a cattle disease. So, as Stephen walks away, he reflects on the narrow-mindedness men like Dizzy and his own sense of isolation. In chapter 2 of Ulysses, it is titled Nestor. Nestor means wisdom gained through experience or age. So, symbolic layers of Nestor. So, Mr. Dizzy as the modern Nestor. Mr. Dizzy parallels Nestor, the elderly king who gives advice to Telemachus. So, Stephen is the Telemachus figure here. However, unlike Homer's Nestor, who is genuinely wise, Joyce's Dizzy is pompous, narrow-minded, and dull, delivering moralistic and anti-Semitic wisdom. So, Dizzy is a parody of the wise old man archetype. He talks a lot but lacks true insight. Dizzy is used to critique anti-traditionalism and outdated authority. He's a hollow Nestor, full of advice, short on wisdom. So, in chapter 3 of Ulysses, it is titled Proteus. Proteus is a sea god in Greek mythology who could change shape at will and will evade capture by transforming into various forms. So it is titled Proteus because the setting is Sandymount Strand. It is a beach, and it also says here that evade capture by transforming. For me, it means wandering in thought. Stephen Dedalus is lost in his thought. It is stated by the end of the chapter. So in the fourth chapter of Ulysses, it is titled Calypso. Calypso came from the Odysseus. So symbolically, Molly Bloom is Calypso. She is sensual, earthy, physically present. She dominates the domestic space. She's in bed receiving while Bloom moves around her. Like Calypso, she is entwined with another man, Boylan, while Bloom, like Odysseus, is passive, detained emotionally and sexually. Chapter 5 of Ulysses, it is titled Lotus Eaters. Leopold Bloom wanders through Dublin on his way to the post office and later to a church. He stops first to collect a secret letter from Martha Clifford, the woman he's having a flirtatious connection with, using a fake name. As he walks, Bloom's thoughts drifts between everyday sights and sensual daydreams, showing his curious and distracted nature. He then visits a church quietly, observing the rituals of Catholic Mass and reflecting on religion, faith, and death with detached curiosity. Later, he runs small errands and relaxes in a Turkish bath, enjoying the warmth and comfort. The chapter's title, Lotus Eaters, refers to Bloom's dreamlike wandering and desire to escape reality through pleasure and daydreams. So, that is also the symbolism for this chapter.
Chapter 6, entitled Hades. In Chapter 6, titled Hades, Leopold Bloom went with three men, Martin Cunningham, Jack Power, and Simon Dedalus, to attend the funeral of Paddy Dignam at Glasnevin Cemetery. During the ride to the cemetery, the men talk about small things like money, death, religion. But Bloom stays quiet and just listens. Bloom quietly reflects on death and his own losses, such as his father's suicide, his baby son Rudy's death, and he also worries about his wife Molly's possible affair with someone else. He observes everything around him and starts thinking about how short and fragile life really is. The funeral began. Bloom watches the coffin being buried and wonders what happens to people after they die, if there's a soul, or if death is just the end. He feels sad and lonely, but he also accepts that death is just a natural part of life. After the ceremony, the men leave the cemetery and go back to their daily routines, showing how life goes on even after someone dies. The title Hades refers to the underworld, symbolizing Bloom's confrontation with death, loss, and loneliness. It came from the novel Odyssey. Summarization of Chapter 7, called Aeolus. In Chapter 7, titled Aeolus, Leopold Bloom went to the Freeman's Journal newspaper office after leaving Paddy Dignam's funeral to get advertisement for case wine merchant approved. The place is lively and crowded with journalists and editors who are all busy talking and laughing. Miles Crawford, the editor, is giving orders while others like Lin Han, Professor McHugh, and Simon Dedalus argued about Irish politics, famous speakers, and newspaper stories. The office is full of noise from the printing press and the men's loud voice. Bloom quietly waits for a chance to talk to Crawford about his advertisement, but Crawford keeps getting distracted by the conversation and jokes. Bloom stays polite and patient, walking around and observing people and the place while everyone else talks to each other. After some time, he finally manages to discuss the ad and get it approved. Before leaving, he listens to one last story the men tell about journalism, and then he walks out of their office, returning to his errands around Dublin. The title Aeolus refers to the god of winds, symbolizing the endless flow of speech, gossip, and noise that surrounds Bloom throughout the chapter. Summarization of Chapter 8 entitled Lastrigonians. In Chapter 8, Lastrigonians, Leopold Bloom walks through the streets of Dublin around lunchtime, feeling hungry and looking for a place to eat. As Bloom walked around, he passed several restaurants and food shops, but he felt disgusted, watching people chew loudly and stuff themselves with meat. This made him think about how humans can be both civilized and animal-like. He suddenly remembers meals with his wife Molly and feels sad, knowing she might be preparing to meet Blazes Boylan, the man she's having an affair with. After rejecting several places, Bloom finally enters Burton's restaurant, but is immediately repelled by the crowded room and the sight of men eating messily. Feeling disgusted, he leaves and decides to go somewhere quieter. He ended up in Davy Bryan's pub, a cleaner, calmer place where he orders a gorgonzola cheese sandwich and a glass of burgundy wine. Title Lastrigonians came from the man-eating giants in the Odyssey, symbolizing human greed and the darker, instinctive sides of everyday life. Summarization of Chapter 9 entitled Scylla and Charybdis. In Chapter 9, Scylla and Charybdis, Stephen Dedalus is inside the National Library of Ireland. He's with several literary men including John Eglinton, George Russell, Best, and Thomas Lister, talking about William Shakespeare and his work, especially Hamlet. Stephen shared his own theory about Shakespeare. He believes that the character of Hamlet represents Shakespeare himself, and that the ghost in the play symbolizes Shakespeare's dead father. Stephen argues that Shakespeare's art was influenced by his personal pain, including his troubled marriage and the death of his son, Hamnet. The men listen, debate, and sometimes tease Stephen for his ideas, but he continues to defend himself. Leopold Bloom also went in the library. He went to look up for some information for an advertisement he's working on. After Stephen finished his argument, he walks out of the library. The men inside kept talking after he leaves, joking about him and about Bloom, who also steps outside soon after. The chapter ends with Stephen and Bloom unknowingly crossing paths, two different men whose lives will soon connect more deeply. The title Scylla and Charybdis comes from two sea monsters from the Odyssey, symbolizing the challenge of balancing two dangers, in this case, between intellect and emotion, or art and in life. Summarization of Chapter 10 entitled Wandering Rocks. In this chapter, the story spreads across Dublin, following many short scenes that show what different people are doing the same afternoon. The chapter starts with Father Conmee, a kind priest walking through the streets. He greets people and helps a poor boy get into a school, and observes a busy life around him. As the story moves from one person to another, the author shared ordinary Dubliners, workers, shopkeepers, students, and families all going about their day. Bloom was still wandering through the city, while Blazes Boylan is shown preparing for his meeting with Molly Bloom. The author also shared Stephen Dedalus' sister struggling with money and sewing clothes to help their family. Lord Lieutenant, who represents the British King, drives through the city in his carriage. Everyone pauses to watch him pass, reminding readers of Ireland's social division and British control. The chapter jumps quickly between scenes, like a series of snapshots showing life in every corner of Dublin.
Over the Ormond bar, the Visurgal hoofs went by. In the carriage, Miss Kennedy and Miss Deuce were talking while sitting with his ex. They talked about gold, bronze, and a wife whose husband is the worst, according to them. Leopold Bloom was in the bar on an errand for his wife when the barmaids came. Stephen Dedalus arrived. His presence was enough to fill the room. He and Miss Deuce were laughing. Lenehan was looking for Blazes Boylan, the other lover of Molly Bloom. When Bloom realized that Boylan might be in the same place as him, he felt tense. As the music of Dedalus filled the room, Bloom's emotion went crazy. His mind was thinking of Molly's upcoming meet-up with Boylan. As Boylan went to meet up with Molly, Bloom was trying to deal with his emotions. The narrator of this chapter was walking with old Troy to pass the time at the corner of the Arbor Hill in Dublin when Joe Hines came along. They were talking about the citizen who is treated like a celebrity because he represents Irish pride. Around 5 p.m., they headed for Barney Kiernan's pub. Sure enough, they found the citizen having a conversation with himself and Garuwen, the citizen's dogs, who is much more known as the Bloody Mangy mongrel. But that wasn't the only reason why they were there. Joe Hines also wanted to meet up with Martin Cunningham. Leopold Bloom then came into the pub, where he was also waiting for Cunningham. Shortly after, Cunningham arrived, and they discussed about the insurance payout after Paddy Diagram's funeral. In the midst of chaos, the citizen locked his eyes on Bloom and blamed him for being an outsider. Bloom kept his composure. He wasn't interested in debating at all. He said that a nation is the same people living in the same place. But the citizen didn't care. He became even louder. Bloom wanted to stop the argument already. Before he could walk away, the citizen threw a biscuit at him. Fortunately, it missed Bloom. Gertie was seated with her companions, lost in thought and gazing far away into the distance. dreaming about a man named Reggie Wiley and how life would be if they were married together. Her figure was light and graceful. Folks often said she was more of a guilt trap than a McDowell. Gertie noticed that Bloom was watching her, misinterpreting her sadness for romance. As she watched the fireworks, she softly lifted her skirt, leading Bloom to pleasure himself. When the fireworks ended, Gertie left and Bloom decided to reflect on women's hidden desire and his own sexual experiences. At the Holy Street National Maternity Hospital, Mina Purefoy was in labor. Bloom arrived and he passed by a group of students that are drunk, including Stephen Daedalus. They are discussing about the miracle of birth, about life, and some humorous stuff. As hours passed, the news of Mrs. Purefoy giving birth finally came. The students left the hospital and was left in thoughts.
Next chapter, summary of chapter 15, Circe. Bloom enters Nighttown, searching for Stephen. He passes by prostitutes like Sissy Caffrey, while Eddie Boardman was bad-mouthing the unfaithful men entering the brothel. While strange visions begin to appear, Bloom sees his dead parents, his wife Molly appearing as a woman named Marion, and his former lover Josie Breen. Each vision reminds him of his guilt, desire, and loneliness. He then imagines himself in a courtroom put in trial for sexual desires by the women he wrote letters about and did things about. Inside the brothel run by Bella Cohen, Bloom meets Zoe Higgins, a prostitute who tempts him with his fantasies, growing stronger as Zoe helps him further. Stephen, drunk and haunted by his mother's ghost, breaks a chandelier in anger. When a British officer attacks him, Stephen Bloom defends him and pays for the damages himself. Bloom carries him out of the district. The episode ends as Bloom sees a dead vision of his son Rudy all grown up. In short, Bloom enters to find Stephen, only to find him drunken and unconscious. He helps him out and they all leave the district. Next chapter, summary of chapter 16, Eumaeus. The chapter starts right after Circe, Bloom, and the still drunken Stephen. Daedalus asks for a drink, and Bloom suggested the cabman's shelter near Butt Bridge to hit a few drinks of milk, soda, or mineral to freshen and sober up. Bloom and Stephen walked through the streets of Dublin, coming across landmarks. Stephen was not yet fully sober, while Bloom was stated to be disgustingly sober. They walked the streets of Dublin when they encountered John Corley, a friend of Stephen, who was homeless. He asked for their job. Stephen offered him his teaching spot, but Corley couldn't teach. Instead, Stephen handed him some money. It may not mean much to Stephen, but to Corley, it means a lot. Mr. Bloom and Stephen made it to the cabman's shelter. They sat in the corner and ordered coffee. A red-bearded man named D.B. Murphy came by and told tales from his travels. Bloom was quite suspicious, though the man's tales are quite suspicious themselves. But in his mind, he wandered elsewhere. Bloom thought of his wife and Boylan. He worried about Stephen and his diet and habits. After D.B. Murphy left, Bloom pulls out a picture of his wife, Molly. Bloom and Stephen talk about her, marveling at her beauty and talents. The episode ends as the pair leaves the shelter. Bloom offered him to drink cocoa at his house, and Stephen momentarily agreed. Next chapter, summary of episode 17, Ithaca. In chapter 17, Ithaca, Chapter 17, Ithaca, starts as Stephen Bloom. Chapter 17, Ithaca, starts as Stephen and Bloom walks to his home, talking about religion, history, science, and earlier encounters. The conversation strengthening the bond between the pair. When they got to Bloom's house, he wasn't able to find his keys. He entered the house through the back and to the basement. He made cocoa for both of them as they drank in the kitchen, continuing their conversation from earlier. After, they went to the garden to gaze at the sky while relieving themselves. Bloom asked Stephen to stay for the night, but Stephen politely declined. He then left. Bloom noticed the signs of Molly's infidelity with Boylan, rearranged furnitures, and cigarette butts. He lit an incense as he reflected on his marriage. He felt jealous, envy. He contemplates his life and his losses. The episode ends as he goes to bed upside down and kisses her wife's plumpy ass as she asks what he did all day. He only gave partial answers as he slept. Summary of episode 18, Penelope, last chapter. The episode starts as Molly's inner monologue. She was surprised because Bloom has never asked her to make breakfast yet. Her thought drifts off to Bloom and his actions, then to Boylan and their infidelity that evening. She remembers her childhood in Gibraltar and her first meeting with Bloom and her jealousy towards Martha Clifford. She reflects about her sexual life, her own desires, as she doesn't feel ashamed even though she's unfaithful to her husband because she has the rights to her own desires. She reminisces about her mother's death and daughter Millie. She was being worried because of her looks, because she gained weight and she's growing old. She mocked and judged the man she has been with, Bloom in Blazes. She thought about life's disappointment, you know, mortgage, stuff like that. Her final thoughts came back to Bloom's proposal. The final parts of the episode and story ends with a yes. Yes, that she accepts Bloom into her life, and no matter how unfaithful she is to him, she still loves him no matter what.
Elements and devices. Exposition. Time and place, Dublin, Ireland, June 16, 1904. Main characters, Stephen Dedalus, Leopold Bloom, Molly Bloom. What happens? Stephen felt left out living with Buck Mulligan and Haynes, while Bloom starts his morning caring for Molly. Both feel lonely and disconnected. What it shows. It introduces the setting, main characters, and theme of the novel. Rising actions. Stephen Dedalus teaches at school, roams around Dublin, and questions his fate and purpose. Leopold Bloom spends his day doing errands and thinking about his wife's affair. Both characters journey across various parts of Dublin, each struggling with feelings of isolation and personal conflict. Climax. The climax happens when Bloom and Stephen finally meet late at night. Bloom finds Stephen drunk and in trouble after a fight at a brothel. He helped and took care of Stephen. Their meeting connects their two separate journeys. They both found someone who understands them, and it shows understanding, kindness, and connection, which is the emotional peak of the novel. Falling action. After the brothel incident, Bloom brought Stephen to his home and offers him food, coffee, and kindness. They shared quiet understanding, but Stephen eventually decides to leave instead of staying the night. Bloom reflects on his life, his marriage, and the day's events, finding some peace and acceptance. The story turns from what's happening around him to his thoughts and feelings. Foreshadowing. At the beginning of the novel, Stephen's guilt over his mother's death foreshadows his struggle with religion and his purpose. Bloom's calm morning and his thoughts about Molly's possible affair hints at the emotional pain he will later encounter. The repeated mention of fathers and sons indicates an important connection that will later develop between Bloom and Stephen. At the start of the story, the characters' loneliness and daily struggles hints at their journey to find understanding and connection later on. Flashbacks. Throughout the novel, Stephen often remembers his mother's death, showing his guilt. He recalls his school days and past conversations, showing how his experiences formed his pride and doubt. Bloom often thinks about his dead son, Rudy, which explains his sadness and longing for a family. He also remembers moments with Molly. Resolution. The novel ended with Molly's famous monologue as she lies in bed, thinking about her life and marriage. She remembers her love for Bloom and their past together and the time he proposed to Molly. In spite of their affair, her final thoughts showed acceptance and love towards her husband. The last word, yes, symbolizes love and affirmation, ending the story with a sense of hope. The characters have not completely changed, but there's a sense of peace and understanding after a long day. Chronology. The entire novel takes place in one day, June 16, 1904, in Dublin, Ireland. The story trails events from morning until the next day. It begins with Stephen Dedalus in the morning at the Martello Tower. Then the story shifts to Leopold Bloom's day, showing his breakfast, the funeral he attended, errands, lunch, and the evening walks around Dublin. Afternoon to night, Bloom and Stephen's paths cross and they finally meet each other later in the evening. Early morning, the story ends with Molly Bloom's monologue in bed. The novel follows a real-time sequence, but also has flashbacks and memories within the characters' thoughts.
So for the characterization, we have 23 characters. For number 1, Leopold Bloom, he is kind, curious, gentle, thoughtful, lonely, and open-minded. He is often mocked and misunderstood by others. Number 2 is Molly Bloom. She is sensual, emotional, witty, independent, and honest about her desires. Number 3 is Stephen Dedalus. He is intelligent, proud, creative, guilt-ridden, and philosophical. Number 4 is Rudy Bloom, appears in Bloom's memory as pure and innocent. Number 5 is Buck Mulligan. He is witty, mocking, confident, but shallow and disrespectful. Number 6 is Haynes. He is curious about Irish culture, but is ignorant and condescending. Simon Dedalus. He is proud, mystical, talkative, but irresponsible and nostalgic. Number 8 is May Dedalus, religious and loving. Her memory haunts Stephen. For number 9, Blazes Boylan. He is handsome, confident, flirtatious, and self-centered. Number 10, Josie Breen. She is chatty, cheerful, and friendly. He is Molly's friend. 11. Martin Cunningham. He is kind, intelligent, moral, and compassionate about Leopold. He is Leopold's best friend. Number 12 is John Henry Menton. He is proud and distant, once admired Molly. Number 13 is Paddy Dignam, a deceased man whose funeral is attended early in the book. Number 14, Ned Lombard. He is friendly, ordinary Dublin citizen. Number 15 is Tom Kernan. He is religious, polite, and humorous. Number 16 is Lenehan, witty but shallow journalist and opportunistic. For number 17, we have Miles Crawford. She is loud and boastful newspaper editor. Number 18 is Nosy Flynn, gossiping, nosy, and common pub goer. Number 19 is Gertie McDowell. She is romantic and dreamy young woman on the beach. Number 20 is Bella Cohen, brothel owner in the Circe episode, dominant and intimidating. Number 21, we have Zoe Higgins, Kitty Ricketts, Florrie Talbot, prostitutes in Bella's brothel, playful, mocking, lively. Number 22 is Mina Purefoy, woman giving birth in Oxen of the Sun. Rudolph Bloom, he is Leopold's deceased father. So for the static characters, we have Buck Mulligan. He stays witty, mocking, and carefree from start to finish. Next is Haynes. He remains polite and shows no personal growth. Simon Dedalus continues being nostalgic, bitter, and irresponsible. Blazes Boylan remains confident, flirtatious, and a thoughtless man. Molly Bloom stays sensual, strong-willed, and practical. Paddy Dignam, he dies early in the story. His character represents death constancy rather than change. So Ned Lambert, he remains cheerful and sociable. Lenehan stays cynical and lazy. So for the dynamic characters, we have the three main characters, Leopold Bloom, Stephen Dedalus, Molly Bloom. Why Leopold? Because he becomes more understanding, accepting, and spiritually renewed. So for Stephen, he moves toward independence and self-knowledge. For Molly Bloom, he gains emotional reflection and openness by the end. So for the round characters, Leopold Bloom, Molly, Stephen, and Simon. So Leopold shows a full range of emotions and inner thoughts, while Molly Bloom emotionally rich and honest in her final soliloquy. Stephen Dedalus is complex and conflicted about religion, family, and identity. Simon Dedalus is also flawed but realistic with mixed traits. Flat characters, we have Blazes Boylan. He is shallow and flirtatious, no inner depth. So Buck Mulligan, arrogant and mocking, no emotional growth. Haynes represents only English outsider and is not complex. Lenehan is lazy and talkative, no change. Paddy Dignam is symbolic but not fully developed. Ned Lambert is cheerful but simple minor character. So for the symbolism, the sea, it represents freedom, emotion, inspiration, and fear. For Bloom's home, it represents domestic love and loneliness. For light and darkness, this represents knowledge versus ignorance. For birds or the flight, it is for freedom, escape, and imagination. Paddy Dignam's funeral, it shows mortality and equality. Molly's yes, because it represents hope, life, and acceptance. Dublin City, it shows the everyday humanity and modern life. So for the motif, this is how the story is made. Stream of consciousness. This reveal inner thoughts and realism of mind, time, and everyday life. It shows the ordinary experiences in our daily life. So, journeys and wandering, it reflects inner search for identity and belonging. Death and rebirth connects loss with renewal and hope. Love and infidelity explores emotional strength, forgiveness, and desire. Irish identity and nationalism, it shows tension between tradition and freedom. So, last, we have language and communication. It highlights expression, misunderstanding, and truth. So, for the elements and devices, we have the protagonist, main characters, Leopold Bloom, Stephen Dedalus, and Molly Bloom. So, Leopold Bloom is the primary protagonist, a Jewish advertising agent wandering through Dublin on June 16, 1904. Most of the novel follow his thoughts, experiences, and encounters. Stephen Dedalus is a young aspiring character. He parallels Telemachus or Odysseus' son. Molly Bloom is Leopold's wife who parallels Penelope. The antagonist is the society itself, Blaze's Boylan, and inner struggle. Society itself because Dublin's prejudice, hypocrisy, and routine life act as obstacles to Bloom and Stephen's peace and freedom. Blaze's Boylan because he's having an affair with Molly Bloom, so he can be seen as a personal antagonist to Leopold Bloom. Inner struggles, Bloom's loneliness, Stephen's guilt and pride, and Molly's doubt all act as internal antagonists.
The next literary elements used in the story is irony. The epic versus the novel. The Odyssey is an epic story made by Homer about Odysseus' journey home to Ithaca, while Leopold Bloom is an ordinary middle-aged man living in Dublin as an advertising canvasser. The irony in this situation is that the adventures of Odysseus, all of his blood, sweat, and loss, was just a normal errand to Leopold going to work, to a brothel, or going home and sleeping. Next example is Molly and Bloom. Molly is an unfaithful wife, for sure, cheating on Bloom with Boylan. Despite this, the novel ends with um, Molly's thoughts on Bloom, her saying yes to him when he proposed to her years ago. The irony is that relationships are difficult and full of flaws, but Molly still shows that no matter what, she still loves Bloom, even though she has been um, unfaithful to him with Boyle. Next literary element is allegory. Telemachus. It's an allegorical meaning of Stephen Daedalus, searching for a guidance and a fatherly figure and his own very own identity. Next is Ithaca, an allegorical meaning of Bloom's return to his home and reconciliation with his humanity and life. Next is Calypso, an allegorical meaning of Bloom's domestic life, his very own entrapment, and his emotional captivity in his loveless marriage with his wife Molly. Next is Circe, allegorical meaning of Bloom's internal trial of his own desires and guilt, the battle of desires and humanity. In Telemachus, it means that um, Stephen and Telemachus are quite the same since Telemachus was seen to be looking for his father Odysseus as Ithaca was losing its strength, and same for Stephen Daedalus since his father Simon Daedalus was quite a deadbeat and his search for a fatherly figure was found by Stephen. I mean Bloom. Ithaca. Ithaca is the home place and the uh, kingdom of Odysseus, so we can easily accompany that to Bloom's house. It's quite obvious, but we can also say it's the reconciliation in his of his it's his own humanity and life since um, he just reunited with his home, his Ithaca. It's like the Odysseus of his Ithaca. He just found his own humanity and his life. Next is Calypso. Calypso is a goddess from the Odyssey trapped into the island of Ogygia by Zeus, and it means that Bloom is trapped, like Odysseus did in Ogygia for 7 years. It explores his own emotional captivity and his um, entrapment in a domestic life with Molly. Next is Circe. Circe is the witch from the Odyssey. Again, Circe is a witch who primarily explores um, sexual desires, just like Bloom's internal trial with his own desires and his own humanity. Next elements is imagery. We can give one example like death. The reoccurring imagery of death follows Ulysses, whether it's Bloom's dead parents, dead son Rudy, and yeah, especially in the Underworld saga. It's it mostly explores the idea of death. It occurs throughout the story, symbolizing the mortality of humans and the memory we hold of them. It's our renewal to move on and just remember them. Next is the sexual desires. We can give this one to James Joyce's usage of imagery to hide sexual innuendos to avoid censorship. An example of this is in Nausicaa. We read the text. A warm tingling came running up his thigh. He saw her skirt and her slip near blown up. The light spread slowly, a long streak of fire running along the side. A rocket sprang, and bang, shot blind and blank. The meaning of this imagery is that as he watched Gertie on Sandy Mount Beach, he masturbated as he showed her undergarments to him, which is quite weird as Gertie was still young at this point. Next literary elements is archetype. Again, we can consider this with the Homer's Odyssey, the heroic type, the hero type, archetype, since Bloom is the stand-in for Odysseus, which is the hero of the story. Bloom is symbolized as his compassions as a modern hero, reflecting that of Odysseus' voyage. Again, we can correlate it to Odysseus himself because Odysseus was a cunning and compassionate person. Bloom is quite the same too, though being quite a bit weird when it comes to sexual innuendos. Next is the journey or quest archetype. Bloom's journey throughout Dublin is an example of this archetype, since it follows his confrontations and discovery as it all happened in one day's Bloom's quest to find himself and go home back to his house. And next is the father son archetype. We can easily give this to Bloom and Stephen. It is shown to be, especially in the last 3 episodes slash chapters, that Bloom and Stephen have a special connection to one another, like a father and son duo. It captures their wholeness and their mutual bond to one another. Next is the unfaithful wife archetype, which is an example of Molly Bloom. It shows his uninterest to Bloom while showing another love to a man named Blazes Boyle. This shows the broken unity of marriage and the search of fulfillment of Molly. The next elements used is diction. Again, usage of realistic language. The novel is made of simple conventional English that reflects normal life of Dublin people. Examples of this is Bloom's casual thoughts like Mr. Bloom ate with relish the inner organs of beasts and fowls. It shows Bloom's plain and sensory thinking. Next is slang and colloquial speech. Characters speak using Irish dialects, slang, and street language that gives authenticity to the voice of Dublin since um, it is made in Dublin after all. Examples is found in Cyclops where the citizens talk in coarse and nationalistic slang. By Jesus, I'll bring that bloody Jew. Next is literary and symbolic language. Joyce is known for using a poetic and symbolic language to uh, present um, art and religion. An example of this is in Stephen's reflection. A father is necessarily evil. It blends philosophy and irony to show Stephen's hatred for his very own father Simon. Lastly is shifting styles. Joyce is good at implementing different writing styles for his works, especially this one. It's quite prominent as if you read the book, Aeolus was written as like a journalistic headline. Um, in Oxen of the Sun, it was written as like a um, medical format, Latin slangs like that, and Circe, it follows a play format, and it's it. If you read it, you'll feel like you're reading a fever dream, as it is a playwright after all. And the flowing and unpunctuated voice of Molly in Penelope, it follows her inner monologue to herself. And next is syntax of Ulysses by James Joyce. It's creative and always changing. Joyce breaks normal grammar rules to show how people really think in Dublin. He often uses long sentences with little punctuation, just like in Molly Bloom's soliloquy in Penelope, which flows freely with emotions. Examples of this in the part is, and his heart was going like mad. And yes, I said yes, I will, yes. Stephen Dedalus' thoughts and Proteus are shorter and more broken, showing deep thinking and confusion. Um, each chapter also has its own style. Again, like in Aeolus, like a newspaper headline. Oxen of the Sun follows the medical and Latin slang format, and in Circe, it plays the playwright format. Um, Joyce's use of shifting sentence styles makes the story feel alive and captures the rhythm of people in Dublin. Next is the dialogue. The dialogue in Ulysses is um, natural and real, showing how people in Dublin actually speak. Joyce uses language, slang, humor, and mixed thoughts to make conversations feel alive. For example, Bloom's gentle tone in Les Gregorians when he says, I'll just take one of those olives. Lovely little things. In Cyclops, rough, um, rough talks shows conflicts like when the citizen shouts, by Jesus, I'll bring that bloody Jew man. And Bloom calmly replies, a nation is the same, people living in the same place. Stephen Dedalus speaks more poetically, saying a man of genius makes no mistakes. These voices make the story feel alive and reveal each other's personality. Next literary element is dialogue. The dialogue in Ulysses James Joyce is sounds natural and real, showing how people in Dublin real monologue. The monologue used by James Joyce in Ulysses is shown as an interior or stream of consciousness style. It is when the characters reveal their private thoughts and feelings directly to the reader. Stephen Dedalus' monologues found in chapters like Proteus and the D are deep and philosophical, such as when he says, signatures of all things I am here to read. Shut your eyes and see. Leopold Bloom's inner voice in chapters like The Strigorians is more ordinary and kind, shown in lines like, Mr. Bloom ate with relish the inner organs of beasts and fowls. The monologue of Molly Bloom in Penelope is a long, unpunctuated flow of emotion that ends with her passionate words. And his heart was going like mad. And yes, I said yes, I will yes. Through these monologues, Joyce allows the readers to experience the characters' thoughts as they naturally unfold, revealing their emotions and dreams and everyday humanity. Next is soliloquy. Uh, Soliloquy, used by James Joyce in Ulysses, appears more clearly in the final chapter, Penelope. A soliloquy is when a character speaks their thoughts aloud, revealing their true feelings. And James Joyce turns this idea inwards through Molly's long, unpunctuated monologue. In her soliloquy, she reflects on her marriage, her lovers, her memories, and her desires, ending with the famous line, "And his heart was going like mad. Yes, I said yes, I will, yes." This part shows her honesty and passion, giving readers a raw look into her mind. Stephen Dedalus is also known for his soliloquies, like especially in Proteus, where he wanders in the beach, thinking deeply about life and art, saying, "Signatures of all things I am here to read." These soliloquies reveal the character's private and raw emotions and thoughts, making them feel real and human as we read them, while James Joyce's deep interest in the inner lives of ordinary people. It shows James Joyce's critical thinking when it comes to life and ordinary people. Next is foil. Leopold Bloom and Stephen Dedalus is an example of this. Bloom is middle-aged, caring, and practical, while Stephen is young and intellectual and restless. Their difference in age, belief, and experiences highlights Bloom's wisdom, and while Stephen's search for meaning. Together, they represent the bond between father and son and the contrast between maturity and youth. Molly Bloom and Gertie McDowell. Molly is an experienced, passionate, and realistic about love, while Gertie is young, romantic, and idealistic. Their contrasts show the difference between a real woman and the innocent fantasy of a woman. Again, Gertie is quite young when um, Leopold Bloom met her. So there is a difference between a real woman and a girl. Next to this foil is Leopold Bloom and Simon Daedalus. Bloom is a loving, humble, and respectful father figure, while Simon Daedalus is quite bitter, responsible, and quite self-centered. Their contrasts show what a real love of a father really looks like, even though you're getting it from someone you mostly don't know. Next is Leopold Bloom and the Citizen. Bloom is peaceful, open-minded, and kind, while the Citizen is aggressive, then nationalistic and prejudiced. Especially when it comes to the chapter Cyclops, their clash shows the conflict between tolerance and hatred, and that sums it up for our presentation for the day. And again, thank you for watching and learning about our topic today. It was quite hectic, but thank you anyways. So if you don't have any further questions for us, um, thank you and goodbye.